Welcome to Bitesized Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brian Razzino. Dr. Brian Razzino has over 20 years of experience as a talk therapist, and he uses short videos dealing with mental health issues in order to connect and educate hundreds of thousands of people. On this show, Dr. Razzino will make reference to his short clip videos and do his best to explain the mental issue referenced and how it can be addressed. Dr. Razzino does not give medical advice, but hopes that he can help people understand what is going on mentally in order to go ask for clarification with their own personal mental health professional.
Boys in America have so much going for them. Enormous energy, opportunity, enthusiasm.
Everybody shut up and listen!
But they're also in serious trouble.
Is that good,
Doing worse in the classroom now than they did 10 years ago.
What up, Daddy?
Hard to talk to, unaware of their emotions,
Just swing, I'm out!
and the most violent in the industrialized world. Why are our boys having such trouble? And what can we do about it?
I knew that I was angry because I was always mad.
My name's Michael Thompson. I'm a psychologist. I believe that we can help our boys, but first we must better understand their psychology.
Play violence is not violence, and we lose credibility with boys when we think it is.
In this program, I'm going to show you new research exploring boys' inner lives, as well as innovative programs that help bring out the best in boys.
Boys need room to get up and move around. We've got to get men as role models in these boys' lives.
And I'm going to introduce you to a group of remarkable boys. We gave some of them cameras, and the footage they shot will help us enter their hearts and minds.
That's all there's to it.
Another new year, Doctor, and another great documentary.
Did you enjoy that?
I did. Anything you send my way, I enjoy. Now, that was Raising Cain. I believe one of the authors of it was a book as well, right? Dr.
Yeah,
Michael Thompson.
Great book. Michael Thompson and Dan Kindlon, I think.
Yeah.
Both contributed to that book. Yeah. And really eye-opening stuff, isn't it? In terms of, one of the things I thought was really eye-opening, and I've been at this for a while, but when I first started to foray into the mental health of boys and what some of the issues were, I was shocked at the number of measures on which girls seem to be doing so much better than boys, which is in some ways contrary to sort of like the ethos now, which is, of protecting girls and providing them with opportunities and the male patriarchy and all this stuff.
It made me think of the parochial schools because they separate gender, and the boys do better when they're amongst just boys than they are with the girls. Yeah.
Which is interesting, right? So, and that actually can be good for girls too, because they can, they can engage in things that they might feel more inhibited or are not consistent with their sort of gender role, right? Like math and science. I mean, one of the things that I thought was really well put was that in middle school, that's when the kids start to really monitor and enforce pretty strict gender roles. Like they are the ones that will call you out if you're doing something that looks quote unquote wrong, right?
Yeah,
you acted like a girl, or you acted too butch, or whatever. That they are the ones that really hammer that home. And so if you're in a classroom that's co-ed, you can imagine the pressure to really stay within your gender role, right? Which means that you can't learn certain things, which is bizarre.
The boy that was in the classroom, I don't know, second or third grade, and he said, "Hey, tell me a story you like to do." Well, nobody can die in the story. Well, it's boring. I don't want. They can faint.
Yeah, this was the preschool class, the 4-year-old and the 5-year-old.
Preschool, wow.
The woman had she had a great approach, which is every day she'd have a pencil and paper, and the kids would tell her a story. It was usually several sentences or whatever. and one of the boys had a unicorn that was killed, and then the unicorn killed the farmer. It was a little nonsensical, but you got the idea. It was a revenge story, basically. And so that was, what she would do is she would read the kids' stories at a certain time in the day, and everybody would, get to, hear their work, and other people would benefit. When this was read, it was kind of controversial in the circle. And many people did not like the death piece,
unless it's a bad person.
And then then this teacher did something really great, which is she had them solve their own problem, right? Because the problem was that we had one boy, and we had other boys too, that thought that it was death was an important concept to hold on to, and like telling stories with death is like, important, right? And the girls there were certain things about death that the girls didn't like. It really fell along gender lines. And so one of the resolutions was, okay, you can have death, but only bad people die, right? And so they sort of were able to work that out, which I thought was genius on the part of the teacher, because as they said, many times what'll happen is, the teacher will rush in with a solution of their own, right or wrong. And what they end up doing is they end up taking away the problem-solving exercise for the kids, right? And she didn't allow that to happen, which is great. And she also did something which was always a concern. Being a female, you kind of worry that she might fall along the lines of the other girls in the class and not like the idea of death, and then sort of declare that no more stories involve death. She didn't do that. She kind of backed away and said, what do you guys think? Right? Which is invaluable.
She identified a problem and let them figure it out. And she
identified a problem. So sorry. She identified a problem, but she also she was letting them know that they had a problem. Like she was saying, you guys have a problem, so that they would be able then to see it and then attack it, right?
Well, it was preschool, and what's bad? What's a bad person? You know what I mean? You don't want to get too in depth, but it's and then sort of they had they were talking about the experiments where you had girls as subjects and young boys as subjects, and you had a mom in there. Yeah. And when the mom would turn around with the female or the daughter or whatever, the girl would figure out what to do. And then what happened with the boy?
Yeah, the boy was just not having it, right? He was just hello. He just didn't like it. He was like, this is not fun, knock it off. And he was just trying to get her attention. Started coughing, all of these things to draw her back in, right? When I was teaching interns at Children's Hospital, interns, young psychology, psychologists in the making, and their internship's like the final step. And so they have we would have these in-services where faculty would come in and they would teach them about, we would talk about certain approaches or concepts in therapy. And one was working with boys. And a question that I would ask them that I typically started off with, there was a couple of questions that I would start off with, but one was, you're in a nursery that is in a woman's hospital that, it's a these are newborns. One of the babies starts to cry. Who do you think, and it's co-ed, who do you think cries out of sympathy for that other baby first? The girl babies or the boy babies? Now, most people were like, oh, the girl babies, definitely. The research shows that, no, that's not true at all. Actually, the girl babies were like, huh, what's going on? And the boy babies were like, I don't, the boy babies hate it. They hate it. They're very, very sympathetic, and they're very, very tuned in to the point where they're very sensitive to the feelings of other people.
Now,
the babies.
They made a a point of that in the womb, the boys their brains are washed in androgen, and that's
Mhm.
why I never heard that before.
Is why what? That's why.
That's why the boys are like that.
Huh.
So
Yeah,
I said estrogen, no, androgen.
androgens. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to
male hormones,
look that up.
sex hormones. Yeah.
Sex hormones. Then how about the Japanese preschools?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, letting them solve their own problems, right?
Yeah,
And
hey, he hit me. Well, don't go by him.
yeah, he does that. Why would you want to play with him?
What we're talking
Yeah.
about is he had this little bully in the class, and he socked somebody, and the guy goes crying, and he finds his playmate, who's a female, and tells the story. Hey, man, he socked me. Little female kid says, he always does that. Don't go by him.
Yeah, don't go play with him. If he does that to everybody, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting. I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch it to see it. I think maybe I imagined it, but what he was crying because he got hit, and what happened was like several kids started to converge on him to talk with him about what's the matter, what happened, right? And instead of the teacher or the teacher's assistant, and so it was sort of a phenomenon of the class, which is they came in to, all right, there's a problem, let's fix it.
Yeah.
And one of the things which I love this idea. They don't focus on in preschool the education of sort of academics and that sort of thing. What they're really focused on is the social emotional piece, that is knowing what it's like to be part of a larger community, right? And what it takes to do that. Now, you can have your questions about culture and the type of community, but that is like super important. And going back to the other clip, the greatest rates of aggression in childhood are seen around 2 years of age, 2.5 years of age, which coincides with entry into daycare and preschool. And so a lot of times it's because they're figuring out, how do I relate to this person? If I want something, I can just hit them and take it, right? Yeah. Oh, no, I have to do that differently? What do you mean, right? So they're trying to figure all this stuff out. And it's such a valuable part of something like preschool, which, a couple of decades ago, people were
even the older kids in preschool, what do you call it? OMAYADI. Means empathy. So the pee lesson. So you had the older kid teaching the younger kids how to pee. That was fantastic.
Yeah. He reaches. He said a stand-up urinal. He reaches around, pulls his shirt up just in case. It's like you don't want to get any pee on that.
Yeah.
The older kid, did this mock surprise or mock fear thing. Yeah. Anticipating that would be the younger kid's experience because that was his experience, right? And so he prepared him for it, and he made a joke out of it. And yeah, that was cool.
I mean, is that a culture thing or like what? Can you imagine if that happened here? Noisy
urinals are everywhere, Pete. So I'm sorry to break this to you, but there's been noisy urinals since. No, is that what you meant?
No, I meant that if there's 3 urinals and you're on the left one, don't go in the center one. There's got to be a space in between.
Oh my, yes. That's an unwritten rule, isn't it? Space invader. So no, but the culture. What do you mean? How do you mean culture? You were asking a question about culture.
Well, can you imagine?
I think so.
Well, what school would have an older boy help a younger boy pee in the United States? You know what I mean? It's
right, absolutely. And so, yeah, I think the cultural piece here, from what I can discern as a Westerner, is the sense of the importance of community and group identity, and that's why it becomes then appropriate for an older schoolboy to coach a younger schoolboy on how to use the urinal at the school and all of this stuff. It's very much in terms of a communal orientation.
Well, we try to put too much. The teachers in too much control, it seems, in the United States. On the social, there should be parameters and enforce the parameters, but in between
well, we're and this is certainly a larger discussion, but we're so focused on the individual and individuality and individual rights and this sort of thing that it's contrasts pretty sharply with the Japanese culture of being more, collective group identity. But my sense is that might be part of the reason why. But I think that there are a number of schools where, and they're private typically, where they try to encourage these types of things, where they build in a social emotional curriculum, so to speak, because they're realizing that kids really need that, and those skills are just as valuable as math and spelling.
Keeping it in the schools, there was a little segment in there, and of course we're doing this to wet the whistle of our audience to go watch this because it's good stuff.
Yeah,
they talk about real violence versus fantasy violence, and fantasy violence is okay. You want to touch on that? Because that doesn't work here in the States.
Yeah, that it's so where to begin on this one? One of the big ones, what I thought was a nice insight is that if you are going to treat the play violence or the fantasy violence that you're seeing in your child as though it's real violence, you're going to lose all credibility. And I think that's fair. I mean, that happens, I think, fairly regularly with violent video games, where parents are very scared that their kids are going to become violent playing, Rainbow Six or whatever these games are, the shooter games. And what happens is the two get collapsed into one, where it's the make-believe violence and the real violence. And it's a line that parents really struggle with, and they can easily lose credibility if they're too heavy-handed about the violence that the kids are, seeing on the screen. Meaning, it's just as almost like they're treating it just as though the kids on TV killing real people, right? And that's that's a non-starter. You can't, the kid's not going to talk to you. The kids, because your premise is all wrong, and you sound you sound kind of illogical. You sound hysterical. But there is a reality here that is important to the make-believe violence, which is the concept of death and the concept of courage and adventure and excitement. And that, I talk to parents a lot about that. I had a parent contact me just the other day, somebody that I had worked with for a couple of years during the pandemic. And he likes to do the soldiers and the military, and he likes to have these big battles and stuff. And she's seeing some more aggression in him, and she gave me a description. She said, "Is this anything to be concerned about?" And we have a relationship. They can always come back and stuff. It's not like somebody off the street. But my big thing for that type of situation is that certainly you want to look at their behaviors out in a much broader context of how things are going on. How are they behaving in the rest of their lives, but also the fact that he's doing the play, just talk to him about it. Start talking to him about it in a way that's where you're just trying to understand it. You just tell me what you're doing, who's the bad guys, who's the good guys, what's going on now, and learn a little bit more about what it is for him. Because my guess is it has a lot more to do with adventure, excitement, challenge, courage, these types of concepts, in addition to death, dying, and loss. These are all concepts that are put into this play activity that the kids are exploring. And it is certainly a way to get out frustrations. There's definitely ways to in play therapy, kids will reenact trauma. They will reenact negative life events. And it is a way for them to reprocess that. It doesn't mean that if a kid is engaging in play where there's aggression or somebody's being terrible to somebody else, that they've been abused. It doesn't mean that they're reenacting something that they've seen firsthand. And that's really important to, you know, kind of hit the pause button on, because people will jump to that conclusion, you know, and there's a real fine line between the two.
Well, I could see why boys would have a problem in school, because I'm sure maybe you did too. You want me to English, hated English.
Yeah.
You want me to write about what?
Yeah.
I'm not passionate about that. I don't care about that. And the stuff that I am passionate about is outlawed. So I can't talk about it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that makes me think, you know, the monastery schools, maybe that's something that they figured out, because isn't that part of what you got to do? They do there is they find out what the kids are passionate about and they go learn about it.
Yeah. So it's self-directed. It's self-directed, right? And the Montessori program is, you know, I think it was out of Spain. A nun developed that program, and it's very much the power of attraction. And kids, they have a curriculum, but it's sort of like they can select types of activities that they do in order to learn that curriculum, and they can choose the time that they do that at, and it's really self-paced, self-guided, with, you know, oversight by teachers, so they don't get too far off. But yeah, that's super important.
Well, the number that hits home is what they say: 70% of the D's and F's that were given out in the school were to the boys. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's messed up.
Well, what, you know, it's like it's what they started to talk about, which is using your brain for that type of activity, thinking, and academics was being considered feminine, or at least not cool, right? Pencil pushing geek, you know, is sort of, you know, the pencil neck geek is the image that you don't want to be, you know, to live up to. And so being cool and tough is not the same as being intellectual. But there is a lot to be said for being able, I mean, I think we can definitely turn that around. I mean, your intelligence can be your superpower. Knowledge can be your superpower. And knowledge is power. And you've seen rappers and people talk about this, that, like, if you want real power, if you want to really be able to do something with your life, knowledge is going to get you there, right?
But to be comfortable with that knowledge, it's easier to be amongst all boys and all girls. Because remember, the boys, they were doing patty cake.
Yes. And they adapted it, right? They made it more of a competitive sport, right? So they liked the challenge of the patty cake. And then they were like, all right, let's see if we can make this kind of like a little bit more up our alley, fun. They weren't doing it, by the way, to get away from acting like girls. There was no pressure or incentive for that. They were just doing what was more natural to them, which is take an exciting, fun game, and now let's ratchet up the stakes a little bit and make there a winner and a loser.
And then they talked about 30 years ago, there used to be 2 recesses in a day. So boys would get out there and, you know, burn off some of that energy. And then you cut down on the recesses, and then the ADHD diagnosis came out. And that one kid that was losing interest, what did the teacher do? He says, hey, go take a walk around the school.
Yeah, I gave him a slip of paper. Yeah, like a permission slip. And I recommend that too. Like, I'll have kids, parents, figure out my pronouns.
Yeah.
Our teachers take, take these 2 books to the front office for me, would you? And then later on the day, send the kid back down to the front office to get the same books and bring them back, right? And, you know, you could do this with anything, but, you know, books, something that weighs something, make it something that's physical for them. And also don't use missing gym or recess as a punishment. Those are things that are like, you know, lunch and the bathroom, like
a release.
You wouldn't say, no, you can't go to the bathroom for the rest of the day because you're on punishment. I mean, that would be ridiculous. And, you know, I still even in 2022, now 23,
Yeah.
get stories of teachers punishing kids by removing recess for ADHD, and they have ADHD. And you're like, what are you doing, man? You're just asking for your afternoon to go to hell. Like, why would you do that to yourself?
And boys
Right?
are labeled 3 times with the ADHD brush than girls.
Yes.
85% given stimulants.
Yes, 85. Now, so 80. Well, 85% of the what was the number? 70% or 80%? Something crazy of the world's stimulants are given to U.S. children. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, in France, they don't I don't know. Maybe it's changed, but in a lot, they for the longest time have not recognized ADHD as like a thing that. I mean, like they recognize that there
That
are
cheese
kids.
backs you up.
Huh?
That cheese
All
backs
that
you up.
cheese. Yeah, that's what it is.
And the wine.
You just need a good roto rooter. No, but they're sort of like, they don't address it in the way that we do. They don't conceptualize it in the way that we do. And I do agree that boys, we can be setting kids up to look ADHD when you put them in a situation that isn't developmentally suitable for them, right? Like if you got a kid that you're expecting, if you have a 5-year-old that you're expecting, this is just another example, but to sit in a pew at church, sing carols from their hymnal, and not have any problems whatsoever, that would seem outrageous to most. You'd laugh them out of the room. But there is a similarity between that and what we're asking some boys to do, which is sit in their chairs all day long and listen to an adult talk and read and express yourself verbally, all of which are skills that boys are behind in, coupled with, maturation. They're not on pace with girls. And they're also very restless.
Plus they have a female teacher.
And plus they have a female teacher. Yeah. Yeah. A number of issues going on at once there, right?
Yeah. Past puberty or whatever. It seems like keep them the same gender teaching the other gender. The problem is there isn't as many male teachers out there. I don't have the number. Did you have any?
Let me ask you. Did you have any male elementary school teachers?
No. Jim?
Yeah, right, Jim. I had 2, and actually they were back-to-back years, and they were great. I remember like them very clearly. One of the things I remembered was what a novelty they were. I mean, it was sort of like, I was engrossed. This man who's doing what I've always seen women do as a job, and like just watching that was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I talk to kids all the time, to boys all the time, and when they have a male teacher, it's almost always their favorite teacher. Almost always. Like, unless the kid is like getting into a lot of trouble and stuff, and having some real troubles, some which might be because of chemical stuff or whatever, but almost always the boys, they love their male teachers. Girls too, but the boys are much more uniformly.
I don't know if they suggested it or said it, but when a boy acts up and it's a female teacher, they have something against. There's something wrong with the boy. They like the girls better than the boys. That's kind of what I got out of it.
Well, so some of that has a lot to do with the teacher's background, right? What one is certainly gender, but there are many teachers that are mothers of boys who are active and rambunctious, and you can get a teacher. You're lucky when you do. You can get a teacher that has boys and they understand them, and that's so valuable, because when it comes to parent-teacher conferences, they can talk to those worried mothers, or they can talk to those worried parents in a way that other teachers can't. Like, I've seen it. This is how boys are. I know it seems strange, and as a girl, wouldn't prefer to do it this way myself, but there is logic to Brett, whatever. And so they've been indoctrinated into this world of how boys function. When you've got a 23-year-old fresh out of college teacher, your experience level is going to be very different. So your understanding of the genders is going to be very different.
So they talk about the girls reaching age 11, they mature first, then the boys turn 12. And then they had that guy, Mike, the goth kid, the drummer that he didn't fit in. He dyed his hair black, but he did find something that would make him cool. You want to tell that story?
Yeah, totally. Well, what Thompson talks about is the culture of cruelty, right? And that in boys during middle school and going into high school, there's really much more of a culture of cruelty, which I think is absolutely true. Right around 5th, 6th grade, you start seeing this more and more. And this guy, what was his name? I'm sorry, the kid's name?
Mike.
Yeah.
13 years old.
Hard to remember name, Mike. So Mike, one of the things that Thompson says is Mike is fortunate enough because even though he's dealt with, these difficulties, he does have a friend group. So like he has an interest and he's good at it. And so he's been able to make friends through this interest. That buffers him in this culture of cruelty. What is most concerning are the kids that don't have that, right? They don't have any friends, which means they don't have any buffer between them and, with all of the assault that's coming towards them.
Yeah.
Mike was one of these kids that
he labeled himself not a regular guy.
Well, he said that he was strange, right? And not a regular guy. Yeah. And there's a difference between being strange as in like truly creepy and weird, think troll.
Yeah.
And somebody who likes heavy metal, when everybody else likes Justin Bieber or whatever, right? That's a different kind of strange, right? But guys like him, when the difference, there's little differentiation between the two. They're both the same. I might as well be a troll, an ugly, disgusting troll. That's strange. It gets collapsed in with a guy who likes metal or likes to wear black or dye his hair or whatever. And thankfully, so in the show, they built up a little bit of tension, and he had a community center concert where his band was going to be performing some original songs. And I don't know if you felt nervous during this, Pete. You probably, with your band experience, might have been sympathetic there. But it was successful, right? He was able to do a good job, and he was able to feel what it was like to be good at something and have that recognized. Now, what's so cool about this? What's so cool about this guy? Okay, and this is what, and I think Thompson got this, but what's really cool about this kid is he didn't deny himself these parts of himself. He was just sort of like, no, this is who I am. This is what I like. And he never gave it up, even though there was tremendous pressure, right? Pierre was. He's getting called freak, goth, whatever, all of these things, and he still stuck with it. And to me, that is awesome.
Well, the other plus was, one, he had a dad that was around, and number two, it was something that dad was passionate about as well, that they could share and communicate over. Then they got into, the kids that don't have a dad around, and the older boys that are taking care of the younger kids. Can't even imagine that. Yeah. Turning boys into men before they're ready. The one grandmother, thank goodness for the grandmother taking, custody of everybody, but calling the one kid lazy as he's getting all these kids ready for school.
Yeah.
That's because that kind of went into you got to have a place to go. And that's why I remember growing up in the city, the boys club, that was a good place to go where you could figure things out. Not the most generally safe place to be, but at least you had some. It was a degree less worse than being out there, with the gangs. But there is the reason why the kids join the gangs, because they want to belong and have safety, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that was striking too is that the recruitment process of gangs was to harass and bully. They would target boys in the community, this kid's community, and what that would do is then get them to join because they could provide the safety, right?
Well, they call it the mask of masculinity.
Yeah, the tough bravado.
Put out that bravado, and even though they're scared shitless inside,
don't care.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's a way to cope with being scared shitless, and also, very real dangers. You begin to reflect your environment. And they talked about identifying with the aggressor, because it's like, how do I blend in? How do I protect myself? Well, if you're out in the wild, what you do is you make yourself look like your surroundings, right? Or you begin to you adopt behaviors of some of the more successful animals, right? That know how to keep other creatures at bay or whatever. And that's just what these kids do, and the gangs capitalize on that. That's their main calling card, which is fear and intimidation. It
was pretty genius where the guy gave the camera to the kid and said, hey, go document your own, that, they're doing the gang signs and all that.
Jumping off roofs. But what about the fighting, right? Like, they would have these kids, the 2 9-year-olds duking it out on a playground in the middle of 11 o'clock at night, right? And, the first question is like, where's the parent? Where are the parents? I can't imagine a 9-year-old being out in the city at whatever time it was. It was definitely after curfew. And then being put in a fight club to show that you're tough enough and you can handle it. What was interesting, the teacher that talked about his own experience with that, which, he had something similar. The kids in the neighborhood would, set you, pick on you, bully you, push you around. What they were doing is they were preparing you for life outside of the neighborhood and the surrounding areas where people will not give you a break, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting, that there was a sort of a self-preservation built into that.
Well, at the time this came out, they said 40% of the households had no father in the home, and the United States, the most put together country in the world, leads the world in fatherlessness. Why is that?
Why is that? Yeah. I don't know, man. Why is the divorce rate where it is?
Well, we are a young country.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Well, they say, we're 250 years old, whatever the number is. And
there is something in our society that, and I don't know, tell me what you think. There's such value placed on men being achievers, entrepreneurs, builders, creators. Like, that's what it means to be a man. But the emphasis on, being at home with your kids, playing with them, sitting with them while they do their homework, making them a meal, watching them at their sports game, those are not things that are held up as, these, I don't know what you want to call them, the symbols of masculinity, right? Or not. And so what would happen, though, if they were? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but
well, the answer is, they said they looked at the suburban kids. Jimmy, are you a man? They look at this, the stuff that's going on in urban environments, and like, oh man, I can't do anything like that. But what they can do is, they were showing the kids having a few, going in the car and pulling a sled in a forest. I don't know what's more dangerous. I think they got their own danger that they come up with.
Yeah, suburban kids are good at getting into trouble. Brings us to a point that is important for boys and girls, but I mean, here with boys, teenagers in general are more sensation seeking than at any other time. But they're also more socially oriented at any other time. So you get these things going together. You get teens getting together to take risks, right? Because it's got both. It's exciting, it's thrilling, it's, you know, and you're with your friends, and so it's got both, and it's really attractive for boys because it's just one of those things they like to do, but they also they test their limits. They like to push themselves and see, am I going to chicken out? Can I handle my fear? You know, if I did fall and bang into something, would I be able to deal with it? You know, like do I actually have the skills or abilities to like execute this flip with my skateboard? You know, all of these questions, they're trying to figure themselves out, pushing themselves, and they've got their friends who are, you know, giving them feedback.
Well, they're getting 7 shots of testosterone a day, and they were talking about Halloween, where the girls dress up as
Skanks.
You said it, I didn't. And then they had the guys doing that routine with Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, and there was, you know,
the cross-dressing.
Not so much the cross-dressing as they thought they were taking advantage of Snow White as she was going back and forth, which I'm like. But then the kid said, "Hey, man, we had no intention for that, but we apologize for that." And the principal didn't have to do anything about that.
Right, yeah. A good teacher will do, or a good parent will do, or a good principal will do, is they will get somebody. They'll call them in front of them, and they will talk to them, right? And they will have an honest conversation with them about, you know, tell me what you were thinking, tell me what was going on, without an agenda except to understand, right? And, you know, one of the guys said this, you know, most people are afraid to approach teenagers and say, hey, I need you to look at me when I'm talking to you, because this is really important. I care about what happens to you, and I need you to look at me so I know you're listening, right? A lot of people are afraid to do that, right? And so they don't do it, or what I think is more often the case is they adopt this sort of like authoritative personality. Yeah. Hey, get over here. You know, I mean, they start talking down to them, so because they don't know any other way to be, you know, and they're afraid to let down the guard and just have an honest conversation with the kid. They don't know how to do that and still have their authority, right? But with these kids, you know, that were doing these things that got them into trouble, that's exactly what's called for, because they're exercising their judgment, the best judgment they have at that moment, which is not that great, right? So, but that's what they're doing, right? It's not like they weren't exercising their judgment. There's just, you know, crappy judgment. So now let's talk about what we need to do, right? But not shame them or humiliate them or make them feel like they're bad people, because that doesn't it teaches them the wrong lesson.
Well, I think those kids were football players too.
Yeah.
And, you know, they were asked at the end of the documentary, you know, do you think you're a man yet? And it was like 50-50, which is probably high, I'm guessing, compared. And then because they're football players, they said you would think that girls would be better at having relationships, and that's not so. The guys would have just as strong ones as well. They just wouldn't admit it, or they don't like to say the word love, right? They say like, you know, I like my coach, or I love, you know, that type of thing. So Doc, I'm another winner, man. You know, I think
always. So a really important thing that I got out of his book, and he said it much better than I'm going to say it, but he said and it sounds elementary, but it's actually really important. When you talk to a young man, it's really hard to do this, but you always are talking to them from the standpoint that they have a very deep and rich emotional life. despite what you're seeing in front of you. And so you always want to talk to that person, not necessarily what you're seeing in front of you. You want to speak to that deep emotional life that all boys have, right?
Peel away the layer of the onion.
Well, when you talk to somebody from that standpoint, it gives them so much permission, right? And it frees them up. And it's also validating. Somebody talks to you in a way that validates your experience, you're more likely to then kind of step forward. This gulf that forms between adults and teens happens when, and this was described in the movie, a teen exhibits an attitude or behavior, usually one that's, one where they're trying to kind of separate themselves and, be the individual. I don't need anybody. What that does is the adults around them respond by stepping back and pulling back, right? And they have a teen that's sort of like not really communicative and kind of grumpy and surly. And so what they do is they stay back. And then what the teen sees that, and the teen pulls back even further. And if that goes on long enough, the gulf between the two, it's a lot harder to bridge, right? Because they're not talking and they're not, if the parents can look at the attitude and the behavior that turns them off and still step forward and talk to them with the understanding that these are people with very rich emotional lives that are deep, that gulf is a lot smaller. And that teen is a lot more likely to come to you when they're struggling with something instead of holding that fear and trying to deal with it on their own, right?
I think parents, I think teachers, anybody that is responsible for the upbringing of an adolescent boy should take a look at this documentary, and instead of pointing the finger to a diagnosis, they should look at the environment that they're coming through just to make sure that that's not what it is before you give them that drug.
Absolutely.
It's not my fault. It's his problem. No, it's right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I there's a parent that I have in mind that I actually was talking to who her kid, I'm going to try not, let me do it without the details.
Yeah.
Keep the privacy. Her kid didn't want to date somebody any longer. He just didn't want to date her anymore. Right. Yeah. And, they dated for a year and a half and they're in high school. And it's just like, yeah, it's like, it's the second half of my senior year. My college applications are done. It's just not happening anymore. And so he broke up with her. He broke up with her before Christmas. And his mom and his dad were like livid with him. And they thought, and his mom would tell him about how insensitive he was being and selfish. And I'm just sitting there like,
social standing. They must be at the club together.
No.
I'm not going to go to the club now.
And the parent was like, she's got anxiety, and how could you do this to her, especially during Christmas and the holidays? And I'm sitting there listening to him, like, as he's saying this, and I'm like, geez, man, that's
the raw deal.
That shit's none of her business. And he was sort of like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, no, I mean, seriously though, let's talk about this. Let's talk about why this is your business and it's not her business, right? Yeah. And so we actually, mom came in at the end and she was like, well, boys. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Did you just say, boys don't have, and then she followed it up with they don't have that much in feelings or whatever. I said, are you serious? You just said that to me. You just said that to a psychologist who's working with your son. You just, like, that was a fact. You stated it like the earth is round. Fact. I'm like, no. So we had this back and forth, and I was being kind of playful with her because I didn't want her to get upset, and I wanted her to hear what I had to say. But the kid was there the whole time, when I was having this conversation with his mom about how essentially I thought this is his business. Mm-hmm. You can get into it, but don't expect it to go well because it's his life, and if you want him to be able to make these decisions, he's got to start to do this on his own and live with the consequences of those decisions. So It was. I thought it was very interesting in 2022 to have a mom sitting in front of me, saying the things that she was saying, and also giving him such a hard time. You know,
I've seen the same thing, same year in high school, breakup, and the parents were pissed because they all belonged to the same country club, and they couldn't go there because the son dumped the daughter. Come on. Dr. Raz, Happy New Year. Another great show.
Well, you know, I used to join kingdoms through courtship, so I guess maybe that's lingering.
No,
yeah, man, good.
I would have never watched this. You know, it's a 2-hour documentary, and I think parents and teachers should watch it. Kids should watch it. You know,
I recommend that too.
Be transparent.
Yeah,
Doc, great job, man. I would give it 5 out of 5 stars.
You'd give it a 5 out of 5? I would. I think I could co-sign on that.
All right, done.
Beautiful.
All right, homeboy, we did another one. Keep it cranking.
All right, brother.
See ya.